Hello, everyone. Another prestigious talk in our trophy room about the international patient access by Isaac Vedder. Big applause. The stage is yours.
Okay. All right. Should we wait a minute or two? Let's just to go ahead and start. Okay. Afternoon, everybody. My name's Isaac Vedder. I work for Epic Systems on tools and standards that help developers build apps. And in addition to holding a few elected co-chair positions within HL7, I also work on a handful of projects, notably including IPA. IPA is led by kind of a small group of hardworking, smart, intelligent, good-looking people, including Mikhail over here that we heard from last session. And so over the next 15 minutes or so, my goal is to kind of give an overview and introduction to the International Patient Access Project and HL7 specification. Talk about some of the recent progress that the project has made, some of the efforts and kind of accomplishments that we've had over the last 6 to 12 months or so. And then also have kind of a little bit of a frank discussion about some of our challenges, some of the observations that I've seen leading a universal realm specification. And then lastly, talk about what's next, some of the ways that we're planning on overcoming those challenges, including some future steps for the project itself. I'm also going to plug that same Birds of a Feather session that we heard Mikhail kind of briefly talk about this morning, earlier today as well. So IPA is both an HL7 project and implementation guide. And the idea is that as nations and locales and regulators across the world look to increase their citizens' access to health data through third-party apps, they naturally turn to FHIR. Like we're all here, we know that. So IPA aims to enable regulators and empower patients and guide app developers by promising greater consistency across countries for multinational apps and FHIR servers. So IPA really standardizes how a FHIR server can securely share patient data with third-party apps, regardless of geographic or vendor boundaries. So the strategy here is that we look across the world, we find what's working, and then we kind of bundle all of those commonalities together into a single implementation guide that's packaged and provided by HL7 to locales and countries that, that can build on top of it. Yeah, so we have 3 seats right here next to each other. So come on up, guys. And then there's one here and one here. It's always nicer to sit down and stand for 20 minutes. Okay, so IPA works. So you've heard about IPS is the International Patient Summary. IPA is, in addition to an abbreviation for a style of beer, the International Patient Access Project. So access and summary. IPA we work really closely with the IPS project. We have interrelated content profiles and operations. The specifications differ in that IPS provides a summary document. So it's and both of those words are really important. So it's a summary. It's not a comprehensive set of the patient's data, and it's a FHIR document, which is kind of a particular way to format and exchange clinical data. Whereas IPA, really, we profile secure, RESTful interactions. So that means things like all of the RESTful operations, like the RESTful interactions, search parameters, things like that are part of the IPA specification. Similarly, we profile Smart on FHIR as part of IPA. We say use these, half a dozen features in Smart in order to allow apps to connect to you, and as an app, in order to connect to FHIR servers in this kind of globally accessible and common way. If you're interested in kind of better understanding how IPS and IPA kind of interplay, come up and talk to me. I think we've got Rob Hossam here this week as well, one of the primary IPS authors, as well as Mikhail. Okay, so now I just want to give a little bit of some of the kind of our intended goals with the IPA project. So big picture here is, can an app actually work anywhere in the world? Like, is that really a goal that's possible to achieve? And quite frankly, like, there are real challenges to that. So differences do legitimately exist in what kind of data is available. In some locales, you'll see race as a mandatory element in FHIR, in health IT interoperability. In other places, for really good reason, it's disallowed to exchange race data on a patient. But what we can do is create this promise to app developers, vendors, and spec authors on what is supposed to work internationally. This lowest common denominator, this baseline of interoperability for patient apps and for apps in general. Patients can benefit by having greater access to health data through APIs. App developers have these guidelines for what functionality they can expect to see in different markets for their app, for their product. Nations, locales can have this starting place to jumpstart national health IT ecosystems with an emphasis on patient access, as well as a larger kind of common market. FHIR servers get to reuse their technology across multiple, with multiple regional requirements. And then finally, for spec authors, for the folks in HL7 and other SDOs, you can see greater use of your specification across different systems, which ultimately is what every spec author wants. So over the last 6 months or so, 9 months, we've really had kind of two big achievements within the project. Towards our goal of kind of marketing and encouraging greater adoption of IPA, of the IPA specification and goals, we've created and released this ipa.hl7.org, which is a regulator, public-facing website that introduces the goals, introduces the usefulness of IPA toward kind of more of a policymaker audience. A shout out to the HL7 FHIR Argonaut Accelerator for funding this project. There's a screenshot of the website. Our other big accomplishment recently was we did an update to version STU1 of the implementation guide. IPA as a project and specification has been an early adopter of the FHIR obligations functionality. Obligations is an R5 feature that kind of refines how the concept of must support works in FHIR. Must support is like this really kind of nuanced, complicated, but also really important thing in FHIR. But ultimately what it boils down to is, how does a FHIR implementation guide set expectations with software developers about what's actually required to conform to that specification? Obligations gives greater specificity on those conformance requirements. And that's important because we can be a little bit more nuanced about what's actually required. For example, historically, many FHIR national core specs really never placed requirements on apps that were interacting with FHIR servers. They primarily only placed requirements on FHIR servers. However, with IPA, one of the things that we're trying to do is tell app developers, hey, if you use this specification, if you use it in this way, if you're conformant in this way, you're more likely for your product to work in different locales. So it became really important for us to also be able to kind of provide these nudges, these hints on to app developers on how their products should work as well. Okay, I said that I was going to mention some of the challenges. We already talked about how data requirements are appropriately different in different locales. I think that's kind of one challenge. I think another is, maybe this is kind of obvious in hindsight, is that jurisdictions differ in priority. A lot of times interoperability priorities are really set by policy. They're set by government. If you don't have e-prescribing functioning in your locale, that's important. That's something important to clinicians. Maybe you're focusing on referrals, or we've heard about e-requesting today is happening, is kind of being profiled in FHIR in many nations right now. Patient summary. I think another kind of subtle important thing here is that just like right now, the international FHIR community, us, right now, you guys are sitting around listening to a spec author talk, not from the perspective of an implementer, but from the perspective of a specification author. A lot of times the international FHIR community forms and centers around data model development and specification development, not just around implementation. So that means, in the local FHIR communities, national, jurisdictional, regional, provincial FHIR communities, mirror that tendency. By which I mean, you have local FHIR communities are also formed around specification development, which means you have local specifications. Local specifications also enable greater jurisdictional autonomy. For example, why should the UK adopt EHDS specs? Also, universal realm authors are encouraged to loosen requirements to increase their kind of scale and adoption, whereas we see like local spec authors need to tighten requirements to enable greater out-of-the-box interoperability. Then finally, of course, standards development organizations, business is creating and updating interoperability specifications, not just maintaining existing ones. So those are a lot of challenges, I think. When I've like worked through this, just made me kind of sad. I don't know, but so what are we doing about this, right? So I think these are some like important structural considerations, and yet, interoperability, multinational interoperability, cross-border interoperability, patient access are important goals that are worth working towards regardless of challenges on the ground. And everybody's here because of that fact as well. So what's next? Really two things. So one is, as we've started to see IPS just kind of take off like a rocket ship over the last year and a half or so, I think IPA and IPS have continued to work together really closely. And that's a trajectory that we're going to really specifically and intentionally continue. We see IPA, is what Mikhail said last session. IPA, think of IPA like access to IPS's FHIR resources. IPA defines the RESTful interactions that you can use in order to retrieve individual resources that are exchanged in IPS documents. So we're going to double down on that approach and continue it. And then one of our other kind of primary focuses has been, I'm going to say Mikhail again, at the Mikhail session last time. If you didn't see it, you should go watch the recording. Really did this kind of survey of a lot of the half dozen plus different nations that are in the process of adopting IPA in some way. I see those nations and provinces in some case as like the constituents of the IPA project and specification. And so kind of one of the strategic goals of the IPA project, I think over the next year, two, will be kind of focusing on the needs of those constituents. So what is Australia looking for? What are Australia's national policy interoperability priorities? Where are they with their national core? In what ways can Australia, Canada, UK patient access, Finland, Denmark make better use of IPA, and how can we help them do that? So my goal is, this is still mostly an idea, but I think we're going to kick off this series of IPA listening sessions where we actually go reach out and talk and kind of interview almost just representatives and folks engaged in national interoperability in those places and more if you meet that description, please do reach out and talk to me. Reach out to Mikhail. We are kind of really interested in hearing more about what are the needs, what are your needs, what is your country, your locale's needs for patient access, for FHIR REST-based standard REST-based interoperability. I think, and then a logical, reasonable outcome from this exercise, I think is going to be a version STU2 of IPA. I think that should just be more of an expansion of IPA1 and be compatible with IPA1. It'll be things like maybe new resources or maybe new profiles, new elements, maybe new security capabilities. Plug for patient access Birds of a Feather session tomorrow. We just really created this session earlier today over lunch. And so I wanted to make sure you guys all heard about it. I think this is intended to be more of a discussion. And I think coming with that mindset of that listening session mindset of, what are your locale's priorities? Where are you seeing success with FHIR REST? Where are you not? What can we do to help? And maybe even what is current state for patient access in your region as well. All right, I think that was everything that I had. I think we're more or less right on time.
We are. Now the room has filled up. Now I want to hear a big applause for Eric Vetter. Great. Are there any questions?
I should say, what questions do you have?
I see one question already.
I see thank you for your presentation. I see the use cases, of course, for big companies who are selling their solutions worldwide. But what is the use case for a patient?
What is the use case for a patient for accessing their data with apps? Would anybody else like to answer that question? Yeah, there we go. I mean, just as we've got a couple of representatives of patient apps in the room, and including Mikhail. So.
Thank you. So Mikael Rinatmäki from Finland. SensorTrend is a health tech startup focused on diabetes. And that's basically me scratching my own itch. I want to get my own data to make better sense out of that. And I do need it from medical devices, but also from the healthcare ecosystem. So we are, for instance, generating a care plan for diabetes. And that means we take the established best practices of diabetes care, and then we plug into EHRs and see whether all of that has been fulfilled. And that hasn't existed in countries like Finland before. We do have the written guidelines, but how do I actually track that my care has been provisioned like that? This is incredibly empowering for me to have that kind of tool, a formalized care plan saying that, hey, this is what I've been getting and this is what I'm kind of entitled to. So that's my primary reason for being excited about IPA.
Sorry, I framed my question then wrongly, because in Holland we have access to our data using a personal health record, so it's a no-brainer that patients want to have access to their data, but this is internationally. So is it also possible that I can go to the US and get my data if I'm hospitalized there? I don't hope so, but...
Yeah. And, I'm sorry, I don't need the mic. I think two answers to that. One is, I think the international patient summary is exactly what you just described, right? Is like cross-border. I should be able to exchange my data internationally. And whereas traditionally, like the I in IPA is meant regardless of where you are as a patient, this is the set of guidelines that apply for an app to be able to access data. Like our profile on Smart, our RESTful operations can work in the Netherlands, can work in the Nordics, can work in the UK. But I think also is that a clear distinction? That's kind of subtle. Okay, but then also, as a patient, can you, as a patient from Canada, can you also access your data when you go and visit a US provider? I think that right now we actually have seen that, and that's live from some Canadian providers and many US providers. like in production. I think right now we have Canada, the US, and some UK organizations all have connected, for example, to one big patient access app, Apple Health, and can do exactly as you're describing, can access their data in one app from providers in those 3 different countries.
I have one more question over there, and then we have to get to our end.
I have a quick question. Some people actually came to us to ask about the SIPA, because it's sort of out of scope today, but I want to get you some of your opinion on that.
The SIPS?
No, SIPA.
What is SIPA?
It's like a secure IPA. Yeah.
I would say that IPA is secure, but maybe I don't know. Yeah, please let's follow up with that. I'd love to follow up and let's talk more about that.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
There is the sharing of IPS specification, which is being produced by IHE, but that's SIPS. So maybe that's a project I'm not familiar with. Thank you. Any other questions? I think we've got technically 1 and 1 minute. Is that wrong,
we can
Max?
make 1 more minute.
Okay.
What's the next speaker saying? Yes, maybe.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, I'll.
One quick question.
Yeah, I'll just pick on your sort of use case for patients. So how many apps do you have access to right now that would analyze your data and utilize it? Not that many. But if IPA would be a reality, you would have a catalog of tens, hundreds of thousands of apps that you could select from and say, okay, what does this app do with my health data? So that's kind of the patient-facing use case.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. Birds of a Feather tomorrow, 11:45 a.m. And we'll see you guys there. Thank you for joining and giving me the opportunity to talk to you.